Well, messieurs, dames, très distingués de la France, bonjour. Soyez les bienvenus ici aujourd'hui. It's a great pleasure to be here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It's great to see so many people here with such an interest in this very important part of the world. Afghanistan is both geopolitically and strategically a very important location. And sadly, the withdrawal 2.5 years ago, and it seems like only yesterday sometimes, has left a vacuum into which already the Chinese are being sucked, and we are seeing a very dangerous situation there, which goes far beyond the scope of Afghanistan itself as a country. I was very privileged many years ago, and looking at some of you here, I'm afraid it was before some of you were born, to actually have been able to go to Afghanistan. And I traveled, I was a student, so I was living simply, which meant I stayed with people, not in hotels, in doss houses and all sorts of places like that. But it meant I really got to know the culture of Afghanistan in all its myriad different representations, and also its great variety. And I traveled from Herat. I took the southern route, having been advised that if I took the northern route, I would need to buy a firearm, and I decided that wasn't a good idea. So I then went to Kandahar, and then up to Kabul, and then up through the Hindu Kush to Mazar-e-Sharif. And it was a year in which there was the most terrible famine. And it was very distressing to see so many families bringing their loved ones close to death to die in the site of the central mosque in Mazar. And that has terrifying reminiscences for today, because something like 15.8 million Afghans, that's more than a third of the total population, will experience some degree of food insecurity before March, and that's only 2 months away. Half of those people, 7.8 million, will be children. So it is an enormous respect I pay to Reza Jafari and the Afghan Peace Dialogue for the humanitarian work that you're doing there, because that is so desperately needed. And we tend to think of Afghanistan more in political and military terms, but we should never, ever forget the humanitarian side of the tragedy that is unfolding there. And sadly, it seems that the global political attention can only focus on one thing at a time. And so the awful conflict in Israel-Palestine has now usurped the attention away from places like Afghanistan. And it is our role, I think, very much to bring that attention back to Afghanistan. But it's interesting, I mentioned it's a strategic hub. And that's probably why, throughout history, so many people have tried to conquer Afghanistan, from Alexander the Great through to the Mughal emperors, the British and the Russians, and they all failed. And it's an extraordinary thing. Afghanistan has never been conquered. And it is that sense of resistance and resilience, which I certainly saw amongst the Afghan people when I was there, that gives me great hope for the future of the country. Also, the other hope is that now the diaspora is so great and so full of very many distinguished people that there is a real possibility that if that diaspora can come together, either under the aegis of the Afghan Peace Dialogue or another, then it can really have an influence. And we've seen so many different constitutions. You were part of drafting one of them. And that is unfinished business, to get a proper constitution which is truly inclusive. And I urge those who seek to create a diaspora council or forum or whatever, and I'm working very closely at the moment with the Afghan and Central Asian Association based out at Feltham, run by Dr. Nurul Haq Nasimi, who got an MBE in the New Year's Honours list, so I'm very pleased to see. I mean, he came over with his family, some of whom now weren't even born, but he came over in the back of a truck and set up that Afghan Central Asian Association over 20 years ago. And it flourishes today. It provides ESOL classes, it provides women's empowerment classes, a whole variety of things which are so necessary for people who've come from a different culture, a different background, and need to adapt to the way of life in Britain. And sometimes it's very easy for those of us who are indigenous here to forget the enormous impact that it is on people coming from those different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, of having to climb. Just how do you get on a bus? How do you pay for a bus? Do you shake people by the hand or not? I mean, fundamental things which are so necessary. And I'm delighted to say that organisations like that are addressing those particular issues. But I also believe that there is a great chance of having dialogue with the government, which is what you are doing. I do not agree that the rest of the world should turn its back on Afghanistan. It seems sadly the Americans have done that. I hope the British don't go down that particular route. So far, mercifully, the European Union has not done so. It has actually wanted to continue to engage with what's going on in Afghanistan. But you may not change the government in Afghanistan, but at least pointing to a sensible solution and the way things can go forward is something that you need to do. I mean, Winston Churchill famously said that he would, if Hitler invaded hell, he would at least give a passing reference to the devil in the House of Commons. You need to, however much you may disagree with people who are in government and what they are doing, you still have to engage with them. You still have to talk to them. And I believe that, the Taliban themselves are extremely disparate, as all of you will know only too well. I mean, the attitude you get from the young ministers in Kabul and the Taliban there is totally different from what you get from the warlords in Kandahar or whatever. You're getting lots of mixed messages from this. So there's no real unified belief. But the other thing I think it's very important for the rest of us to remember is that you can't put the clock back. Afghanistan has experienced 20 years of female emancipation, of when women were able to work, they took on distinguished roles in public life, judges, who, some of whom are here, and such like. And that is in the memory of Afghanistan. You can't suddenly pretend that never happened. It's there. And so you can't put the clock back. And that is another, I think, encouragement for us to think about the future of Afghanistan. But I really do feel that UPF here has a fundamental role to play in the coordination of this. And I've always made very clear to the Afghan and Central Asian Association that if there is going to be a diasporic council or forum which has credibility, it has got to be inclusive. It has not just got to be Pashtuns, it's got to be Hazaris, it's got to be Uzbeks. You've got to include all the different disparate elements in Afghanistan today, those tribal influences. They've all got to be there in order to be able to have that authority, which hopefully will not only have some authority with the Taliban, but also with other foreign governments, because that diaspora is going to have to convince Washington, London, Paris, that this is an important talking point. These are people who've got the future of Afghanistan, not only in their heart, but also in their mind, that they do actually understand what is going to happen and what can happen in Afghanistan. I still have a beautiful bracelet, which my wife now wears, of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. It's a rich country. It has so much to offer, not just in its strategic position, but in its attitude, in its culture, and such like. And that is something I think that we almost all bear in mind. So I commend all of you for the efforts that you are making. May they be redoubled, and may UPF act as some kind of catalyst in bringing those different groups together. And yes, there will be disagreements. I mean, people in Afghanistan haven't always got on well with each other. Of course, there will be disagreements. There will be significant disagreements. But how do you resolve disagreement? By dialogue. You don't resolve it at the end of a Kalashnikov. You resolve it by dialogue. And that is something that has got to be done. And the rest of the world has got to see that the people of Afghanistan in the diaspora are capable of doing that, of coming together, of speaking with increasingly authoritative voice about the future of their country. So that hopefully it won't be too long before some of those people who have been so massively and horribly displaced will actually be able to go back to a country that has a bright future. Thank you very much.